to the Keto Summit Show, where it's all about helping you lose weight, regain energy, and live a healthier lifestyle using a keto diet. Here's your host, Louise.
So welcome to the Keto Summit Show. Today we are joined by Dani. And Dani Conway has been a functional nutrition and functional medicine practitioner for the past 11 years. She's the creator of the ultimate Undiet fat loss formula and specializes especially in helping women achieve permanent fat loss, sustained energy, and increased focus. So today we are going to talk about the fact that there's no one-size-fits-all keto diet and 3 ways to customize keto for you. So I'm going to start by welcoming you. So thank you so much for being on the show and answering my questions.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to be here because this is one of my favorite things to talk about. I mean, I love keto, but the customization element of it and really of any way of eating is the key to success long-term, especially for women. So this is definitely one of my favorite topics to chat about.
Well, let me jump in with a really crucial question then. What do you feel is the number one reason people fail on a ketogenic diet?
I feel like the number one reason why people fail is because they feel like they hear ketogenic diet and they feel like it's all about the fat, which it definitely is, but especially for women and getting enough protein and the right type of carbohydrates and honestly, the right type of fats, quality of food, all of those things are going to make a huge impact on someone's success or failure with a ketogenic diet.
No, I love how you bring up the fact it's not just about the fats, because that is a slight misconception in so much of the keto sphere. And in particular, nutrient density, a lot of it really makes a big difference. It's not really just watching what your macros are.
Absolutely. Real food is important. It's a term that I kind of use the term naked nutrition, just really focusing on real food, real ingredients. Just because something says keto on a label or says it has 2 grams of carbs, it doesn't mean that it still doesn't contain insulin spiking ingredients. So there's a lot of factors when we're looking at, what's keto and what is success on keto.
Well, so if our listeners want to be successful in starting a keto diet, what type of questions should they be asking before they begin?
I feel like they should really be asking either, looking at what they should look for in terms of dialing in their macros for what their daily routine looks like. Are they trying to, as far as changing body composition, workouts, resistance training, endurance training? Are they just starting out, or are they more of an experienced athlete type who is trying to get a next level edge on what they're doing? All of those things are going to have a huge impact on the best way for that person to begin the ketogenic diet.
Right. So it's really examining kind of what stage you're at in your health journey, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, on the regular layman's person to the athlete, and then we have, if somebody, especially with women, if they're struggling with weight loss resistance, insulin resistance, digestive issues, hormone imbalance, all those things play a huge role.
So if someone's just looking to lose some weight, maybe they have some hormone imbalances, they're not, a star athlete, what are some of the things they should really be considering before they even try keto? In fact, should they even be trying keto?
I feel like it's definitely something that they can try and experiment with and see how their body responds. So the one thing I think that we as, in the nutrition industry, fitness industry, we get so focused on what a magazine says or what, an article says or this publication or that publication without looking internally and watching how our bodies are actually responding to what we're consuming. So there's actually a lot of your body, I like to say the body tells all. So by looking at how you feel after you eat your meals and certain foods and dialing things in, and, there's definitely people that are going to feel better eating higher amounts of proteins and fats and that kind of thing. So that's some definitely considerations to take into when starting out.
Would you recommend a food journal to help with that?
Yeah, I definitely do. I think food logging is something that some people hear and they want to run the other direction. But what I kind of like to put a context and a spin on it that, you don't have to food log your whole life, because once you dial things in, you really learn what your body needs and how your body responds. There's a freedom in knowing all of that after you kind of realize that, learning like I said, how food is going to make you feel. So once you know that, and once you've done the food logging and done the work and dialed, I like to say with my clients, I teach them to go from mastering their macros to intuitive eating. So that intuitive eating doesn't come until you do food log and figure out how you're feeling after meals. But it's definitely a process, and I find that it allows women to feel that freedom from food and comfort in their skin and really know what their body needs for a long-term success, long-term maintenance, and not have to feel like they're on a diet forever. That's kind of where the diet comes in, because I'm a big believer in not being, kind of shackled to that diet mentality.
No, totally. So they should start from a more perhaps rules-based approach, see what other people are doing that works, try it out, keep a journal, and then really start listening to how their body works and determine what really works for them, as opposed to just hearing, hey, I have to eat this amount of fat, this amount of carbs, this amount of protein. Everyone else is losing weight. Why am I not losing weight? And then, allowing themselves to be able to experiment and test out different formulations almost to see what works for them.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I'll just kind of add in there and fine tune a little bit and say that I don't think there's anything wrong with starting, obviously keto offers a very specific guideline for percentages and ratios of what we should be consuming as far as macros go. And I don't think there's anything wrong with beginning in that place. But I think what happens is that, one person tries it and it works great, and the next person, their best friend tries it and it doesn't work as great. And so, because it's worked in a certain way for so many people, people tend to get stuck in not experimenting, but only going down the path that is not really working for them. So, and I think it's scary to go out and to try other things, and why has this worked for so many other people and it's not working for me? But then there's a lot of confusion in that too, of well, I've tried it, but I don't know what to do differently. So what I see a lot in my practice is, a lot of food logs that I have the clients do before they come initially meet with me, and it's all about the fatty coffee, the fat bombs, which are all great, and we all know that they're okay on a ketogenic diet. But there's the biggest thing I see is a lack of protein, and especially like I was saying, with women, we're trying to change our body composition. Muscle mass is the most metabolically active tissue we have, and we have to support that. We're not talking about tons and tons of protein. We just really need to have a baseline and stick to that, and then build on that.
Well, so we've touched on a couple of different ways, perhaps, of fine-tuning a keto diet, experimenting with it to find the right mix for you. So what would perhaps, going back to the original title for the talk, but what would 3 ways be for people to really customize their keto diet?
Yeah, I think first and foremost is the macros. So macronutrients, proteins, fats, and carbs. If someone has tried something and it's not working, make some shifts, make some changes, up the protein, lower the fat. Make sure you're choosing low glycemic veggies as your carbs, and not just a product that says it has 2 grams of carbs in it. What I can share is that a baseline for protein that I suggest for women is 50 grams. And then making adjustments based on their activity level, where they are in, life and daily, function and focus and things that they may be struggling with. But 50 grams minimum. A lot of women I see aren't even getting that much. And I feel like next after macros will be intermittent fasting. I think it's a great tool to use. I started using it myself years ago before it was even a thing to help with my gut health. And then from there, it really, one of my rules is fueling before fasting. So I think dialing in the macros first and then implementing the intermittent fasting, that's a great combination together. And then last and not least, I feel that carb cycling, where we get a little bit more carbs, is important. But a little caveat, if I could share with that, is number one would be do the carb cycling on your active days. So I think that's important. We want to do that when we're most insulin sensitive. And, when you're first starting out, that might not be a great tool to use right away. I think that comes with in time and making sure that, you're active and consistently active to be able to cycle some, good carbs in and then be able to maintain and get back into ketosis right away.
So would you suggest in terms of carbs, like cleaner carbs, sweet potatoes or additional vegetables, root vegetables, carrots? Is that the type of thing?
Yeah, I love that question. So first, I like to actually, when people are first experimenting with carb cycling, I like to have them just add in more greens. So just add in more of even though they're lower glycemic, just larger amounts of the good green salads and endive and kale and spinach and all of those things, and enjoy a larger salad and that type of thing. And then from there, like you said, sweet potatoes are great, root veggies, carrots.
Yep.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
Nice. And do you have a rough rule? If someone has been perhaps doing keto for maybe a month and they're getting, they're feeling like they got some great results initially, but maybe they're finding the weight loss is plateauing, maybe they should try carb cycling at that point?
Yeah, I think it can go either way. So I've seen both where carb cycling is definitely a tool that can help break a plateau. And sometimes I feel like with some individuals, they might do better increasing, kind of playing with the amounts of fat just a bit, increasing and then decreasing back to their baseline of the fat amount as well. So I think, again, it comes back to a little bit of trial and error and seeing what works for an individual. For some, like I said, I see, and this goes for me, especially personally, sometimes it's a little more fat that I need to help boost my energy. And other times it is a little bit more carbohydrates and less fat actually. So it keeps the body guessing. Our bodies get used to doing the same things over and over again. And that is a great tool to kind of play with so that we don't get into that plateau, that weight loss plateau.
And I wanted to just go back to the intermittent fasting you were talking about, because as you said, you've been doing it before it was even a popular thing like nowadays. So what kind of benefits have you seen from doing it for such a long time? And how do you personally do intermittent fasting?
Yeah, I'd love to share with you on that. Thank you for asking that. So for me, I started years ago when I was having, I have a history of digestive issues. It's one of the reasons I got into alternative, kind of looking at things alternatively and doing things from a functional perspective and really figuring out like root cause and what was going on and that type of thing. So what I noticed with the intermittent fasting when I was doing intermittent fasting, but not realizing that it had a name, was that when I would go longer times between dinner the night before and breakfast the next day, that I felt like it gave my digestion a break. And my digestion started to feel better and better. And then I would use things like bone broth and herbal, really, rebalancing herbal tea, things like that. And so that is kind of where I started. So really I found a huge improvement in my digestive health. And then I noticed, of course, if my digestion was better, my energy was better, my focus was better. So it was kind of a bit of a domino effect. And, in terms of starting, I get a lot of questions on this because some people say, oh, I've heard, the 16-8 or whatever amount of hours. So 16/8 is 16 hours fasted and 8 hours of an eating window. But that can be overwhelming at first for someone who literally only has 8 hours between dinner and breakfast. So starting slowly, going to 9 hours for a week or two, and then 10 hours for a week or two, and increasing from there. And then I think the other important thing to note, to comment, when you are trying and first implementing the intermittent fasting, is that it's not something that you're not supposed to force yourself to stay fasted and be hungry. So if you're really noticing that the physical hunger is happening at 10 hours, then stick with 10 hours for a period of time until you can move forward from there.
So yeah, it sounds like, going back to the testing and experimenting and really see what works for you and taking that step by step, because what works for somebody else may not be the right balance for you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also we have to remember symptomatically for what's going on for an individual. So insulin resistance, someone who's experiencing cravings and excessive hunger, it's definitely a tool to help rebalance the body, but it's, again, also not meant to be forced in any way. And going back to that rule of fueling before fasting, so making sure that someone is fueling properly during their eating window, whatever duration that eating window is, makes that period of fasting come a lot more naturally to an individual.
And in terms of fueling, what kind of, do you just mean making sure you're eating enough food beforehand? Okay.
Yeah, just making sure the macros are dialed in. So for example, let's say someone's ratio of proteins, fats, and carbs, they're balanced, whether it's strict keto or low carb, whether it's really not working for them, basically adjusting that, making adjustments to that, and then going from there. So waiting until they're feeling balanced with their food, not hungry all the time, and then kind of extending that fasting window. Because if you're hungry all the time during an eating window and the food is fuel, so that's what I mean by fuel, and it's not dialed in during the eating window, then it makes it really hard to go for a longer duration of fasting. Got it.
So I definitely like those 3 tips, checking out your macros and really changing those up. The intermittent fasting is something I personally have always loved. I agree, it really helps with gut issues, but it's also a boost in your energy, especially I like to work in the mornings, and then it just gives me that extra brain charge that even coffee can't bring. And again, carb cycling, it is just sometimes having higher carbs works, but it's often difficult to know when the right moment is to actually cycle that extra carbs in, rather than just, a sugar craving that you can deal with maybe a fat bomb. So it's really learning how your body works and understanding what that feeling is when it's triggered.
Yeah, that's exactly, you kind of hit the nail on the head, so to speak. And just like I said, it's hard to extend a fasting window when the eating window isn't balanced yet.
Well, so I have one last question, which is something we get asked quite a bit, which is, do we have to do keto forever?
Yes, absolutely. So, I feel like we think about forever, we think about diets, it's like all of the nonsense information out there. I think the important thing to do forever is what actually works for an individual. So what in the context of customization, I feel like, if someone feels better on a lower carb, maybe 40 to 50 grams a day, versus the 20 grams of carbs that the ketogenic diet suggests, and it's more realistic for them long-term, forever, right? Then that is where they should stick to. I always like to ask someone, what's more important, that you're eating 20 grams of carbs a day, or that what you're doing is working long-term? So I feel like when the macros are dialed in, when you're getting the right nutrient-dense foods, high-quality foods, that is what's going to sustain long-term, with, whether it's 20 grams of carbs, 40 grams of carbs, whatever variation of customization that we're talking about.
Fantastic. So you don't have to do exactly strict keto forever, but it's really using this as an experience to figure out what works for your body and keep experimenting.
Yeah, definitely. And if I could just add one more little kind of tidbit on the topic of low carb, is that I feel like even with the way that our world is, even if someone is eating 60 grams of carbs a day, 70 grams of carbs a day, low glycemic veggies, all of the quality food that we're talking about, in the big scheme of things, that's still on the lower end as far as carbs go. And for those individuals who love to eat a little bit of fruit here and there and that type of thing, I feel like enjoying those nutrient-dense foods is more realistic long-term. And that's what they need to really decide and focus on as far as that long-term success.
Fantastic. Well, I have a slight follow-up question to that then. There's a lot of debate about whether you should count net carbs or total carbs. What's your feeling on this?
Yeah, so I've experimented with both because I obviously get asked this question a lot, and I think it's important to address, actually. I feel like net carbs, when someone's trying to be specific with ketogenic diet and follow the strict the guideline of 20 grams of carbs a day, I feel like that should definitely be net carbs to make sure someone's getting their fiber, to make sure that for women's hormone health, getting those 20 grams of net carbs is going to be really important. Then beyond that, when we're talking about maybe a little bit, long-term sustenance for, like we talked about, forever or long-term results, I feel like when you get into the 40 to 50 gram range, then that should just be total carbs versus net carbs. And I find that works. That's how I coach my clients along those guidelines. If it's, stricter keto, we stick with net carbs. And if it's in the what I call lower carb range, anything above that, we stick with total carbs.
That's a great distinction. I haven't heard that one before. So I'm sure that would be super useful because we get asked that question a ton.
I definitely hope so. And for your listeners, if this is definitely something to experiment with as well, if you feel like net carbs isn't working or one's not working, don't feel shackled to just continuing on something. I get it's so hard to try to make a change when you're confused and not sure what to do next. But our bodies get complacent and some things just don't, just work for some and not others. So.
Well, thank you so much, Dani. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. You've told us a lot of great, useful information that's actually really actionable for people as well. So thank you. And everybody, you can find out more about Dani at nutritionthenaturalway.com. And we'll drop in some of the other links to her Instagram channel and YouTube channel into the notes as well.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. It was fun.
Thank you so much. Hey, it's Louise from the Keto Summit Show, where we share practical tips and actionable advice to help you look good and feel good lifelong. So if you've enjoyed watching this video, then please click the subscribe button on YouTube and share our YouTube link with your friends and family. Thanks, and see you on the next episode.